The topic of today is how to study like a beast. Made it sort of a clickbait title to hopefully get some guys joining, and it seems like the turnout is pretty decent today. The idea of this masterclass is mainly that we're going to look at how we should study. So in essence, we're going to be thinking about how we can spend the time that we study as effectively as possible so we gain most improvement, most skill for every minute that we spend studying. We're going to do that by briefly looking at why we study, and we're going to look at some science, key takeaways, what do we learn, and we're going to look at some examples. And I forgot the reading tips, I realize now. I wanted to do that, but I can just give them to you anyway. I know them by heart at this point. So the goal is to optimize your study routine in order to get the maximum out of every hour spent studying. And in other words, we are going to answer the question how. We're not going to go too deep into like what should we study. Yesterday, Tom had a session on scheduling where he kind of answered the question when and how we can structure that in a way that's effective and efficient. And now I just want to basically provide some sort of structure and some guidelines so you can implement a system where you actually take away something out of your study sessions instead of just randomly. Like I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see low stakes players make, and even mid stakes players, is that they do random stuff that's not really structured. And if you like compare that to any other field, let's say basketball or like any other competitive field, and you compare like the training schedule of the average mid stakes player to somebody who wants to like, I don't know, be an Olympic champion in some sort of specific sport, then the differences are massive. And the goal here is to basically try to see what the science says about how to become an expert in certain fields, what kind of exercises we can do and implement into our own strategy, and then use that so that every time, like every hour that we spend studying, we're not playing poker, right? So the benefit of optimizing your routine instead of like just adding more hours, like optimizing your routine is going to yield way more. But that's basically what we're going to be doing today. It's going to be sort of a lecture type call, but feel free to interrupt me and ask me any questions. And I try to like make it a little bit interactive, but it's for this one it's pretty tough because there are no like quiz questions that you can ask where you should answer a question with right or wrong and you can have a debate on that, because like there's no like should you defend this spot, yes or no, and okay, what do you think, it's just this is what we know about how to become an expert, and that's kind of it. All right, I wanted to start off with asking you guys a question, and in the next slide you can answer it, and then we can kind of go over some of the answers. And I want to stress that again, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. And I thought about it a little bit for myself as well. But the question is, why do you study? And I could find like a bunch of different reasons, and they all have some merit for me personally. But I was just wondering, like, what do you guys think about this as individual players? I haven't used this. Would you like to approve student comments before they're posted? Oh, that's a tough one. On one hand, we are with like 9 adults. On the other hand, they're all degenerate poker players. So I'm just going to click yes, but it's a close call. I said there is no right or wrong answer, but I feel like the one who made the Trenish comment won. Still, what does a Trenish cost per hour? Is it more or less than a regular woman?
$79.95.
Who knows? $69.95.
I just heard for a friend.
Okay. Nice. All right. So we got 2 more answers. I'm just going to see. I'm not going to read them all out loud, but the gist is pretty similar. We want to play better than our opponents. We want to move up. We like studying and improving knowledge, improving skill. That's the gist of what we're saying. And I think that's pretty similar to why I'm studying. I wanted to point to bring this up. It's the Circle of Influence by Covey. He made a book about the taking control over things that you have control over and releasing to the things that you don't have control over. And one of the reasons, the most important reason for me to study, like the second most important, the most important one is I just enjoy it. I enjoy solving a spot that I don't understand. And then the second one is taking full control over the things that I have control over makes it easier for me to surrender to the things that I don't have control over. So if you see the circle of influence, then the part where you have control over and the part where you have influence over, they're like usually in the real world, there's not like this, even though it's in this model, there's not like this border separating either or. But in poker, it's different. You have control over your study routines, but a lot of your results are actually external. And in everyday life, like that's in a lot of things that you choose to do, you have a lot of influence on the result that you're getting. If you're like me, dieting and drinking a beer while you're doing a masterclass, then like chances are the next time I'm standing on the scale, I won't have lost weight. So there's a pretty direct relation between the actions that I'm taking and the results that I'm getting. And in poker, that's not really the case. So for me, it's if I just make sure that everything that's in my control, I manage it as much as possible. That makes it easier to just surrender to the fact that the results in the mid long term are outside of my control. To give you an example, the first couple of months of this year, I think after 4 months, 5 months, I was down 12K, something like that. That kind of shows you, like I since then I won, luckily made up for it, and then some. But it kind of shows you that how long it can take before your actions turn into results in poker. And for me, like knowing that I'm someone who takes pride in studying and who takes this poker thing as a profession and try to approaches it as professional as possible, makes it easier to think after 3 months to just say, okay, I'm in a situation right now that kind of sucks, but like I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. I check every box that I want to check, and I do that somewhat consistently. I don't need to like do it every day, but I do it somewhat consistently. So it's fine that my results are not in line because I can just focus on other things that are in my control. Like summarize some benefits. Like for me, the biggest one is taking control. And I think a lot of players underestimate that. Like the ability to take control of poker is actually quite large. It just doesn't translate to results as quickly as you think. And I see a lot of players that are just taking it the other. That's why I mentioned it. They're taking it from the other side. They say, well, I'm losing 3 months, so why would I take control over the situation? Like it doesn't really matter anyway. And I think if you just study consistently, then it's bound to happen that you're going to take it from the growth mindset perspective. For me, it's you'll grow interest in the game and increase the skill gap. I think these are the three most important, and then there are like a bunch more. All right, there's this Stanford professor who has done a lot of research towards growth mindset exercises and how that translates to results. And one of the studies that they've done is they took classes of high school students, and in one class they said, well, we're going to give you guys growth mindset interventions. So they got taught about how they are in control of the results that they're getting, and how, for instance, the IQ points that they get on a certain test, that they're not fixed, that you can actually get better and in certain areas and whatnot. And the other portion of the group got result-oriented feedback, where they said, basically they were very positive, but they said things like, oh, you got this, you're so talented. And what they did is they measured the GPA at one point, and then after they measured it again. And what they found is that, like you can see it in the graph here, the kids that were taught a growth mindset scored better, and the results actually diverged for the group that didn't get those skills learned. So there's a pretty important power in the word yet. That's something that the growth group got pretty much heard consistently. If they failed, they said, the teacher said, well, this problem is too tough for you right now, but we'll make sure that we're going to work on the process, and in a couple of weeks you can try again, and then we'll try to make you succeed. It's important to keep in mind that this growth mindset is not fixed, which is, I'm going to skip this for now, which is something in itself. You have a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And I just want you to keep in mind that you can learn these traits. Just some examples of a fixed mindset and what somebody with a growth mindset would say. The best players are the best because they are talented. So Linus Love is a beast, and like, he's just special. Somebody who comes from a growth mindset perspective would say talent is something that can be achieved through hard work. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this one and this one I think are pretty cool. Imagine a player that's doing a sim, some sort of sim word, and he sees solver bets 7-6 suited here, even though it has no equity. That's weird. This is why I hate studying with a solver. There's just so much noise. This is something that I'd say to myself, like, let's say when I was playing 25 and now 50 and now, it was just looking at a sim, looking at a bunch of noise and just thinking, okay, I'm never going to get this, so fuck this shit. And now I take the approach where I see the same thing. I still don't understand it, but I just acknowledge that I don't understand it yet, and try to gather the things that I can take away from the sim. Same things with running bets. Like there's a subsection of players that feel like they have a lot of negative self-talk, and they'll say stuff like the fish always wins. Why do they take 10 stacks? I always run bets. And I try to reframe that for myself. And this is something you can actively do. We'll come back to that later. But when I'm running bet, I really try to reframe it in a way where I'm saying, I'm not running good now, but this is an opportunity to prove myself that I can handle this, or this is an opportunity to learn. I'm feeling like really frustrated and angry right now. How can I use that frustration and anger and make something good out of it? Obtaining a growth mindset is really important. I'm going to read you an excerpt of Angela Duckworth's book Grit, which is one of the books that I'd highly recommend. And I think this what she says on this specific topic is really important. That's why I wanted to highlight it. She says, I like to think of a growth mindset this way. Some of us believe deep down that people really can change. These growth-oriented people assume that it's possible, for example, to get smarter if you're giving the right opportunities and support, and if you try hard enough, and if you believe you can do it. Conversely, some people think you can learn skills like how to ride a bike or do a sales pitch, but your capacity to learn skills, your talent, can't be trained. The problem with holding the latter fixed mindset view, and many people who consider themselves talented do, is that no road is without bumps. Eventually, you're going to hit one. At that point, having a fixed mindset becomes a tremendous liability. And in poker, there are so many bumps that you can encounter. And if you approach it from a fixed mindset perspective, then it's going to be a very tough profession to be in. And like, if you feel like any of these things resonate with you, then it might be cool to try to, like, for one, be aware of it, and two, try to see if you can change some perspectives that you have, because there are basically three options. You can either not do anything about it and you'll likely fail. You can change them, your mindset, or you can give up. And usually what happens is people toggle between the three without knowing really where they are at, which is like pretty common for lower stakes players, is that because they're not aware of it, they're just cycling from frustration to trying again, frustration to try again, and rinse and repeat until they either have some sort of breakthrough or they just quit. So how can you obtain a growth mindset? How to obtain a growth mindset? It's some perfect English there. Well, one of the things is cognitive restructuring or reframing. To give you an example, and this is an exercise that's actually, it can be annoyingly fun for yourself, and like a little bit annoying for the people around you. But every time you face adversity, you can take a step back and try to reframe that adversity to like some sort of challenge or opportunity. So, for instance, I posted this in my blog, but not that long ago, I went to some tournaments in Amsterdam. I lost like 8K playing the tournament and some cash games. I went home and I contemplated, should I play the next day? I could go back, drive like an hour, and then rebuy for 2K. Like I would fire my third bullet. I would start at the beginning of the day. But I'd start with 20 big blinds. And I thought to myself, that's not really my game. I toggled back and forth whether I wanted to play or not. In the end, I decided playing. So I went there, drove for an hour, waited 45 minutes before the tournament started because there was a delay. And then I played for 3 minutes, ripping in jacks on my second hand versus ace queen with an ace on the flop, and it was gone. And I walked out of the casino. At that moment, I thought to myself, okay, I live in Den Helder, which is a kind of a shit city. Normally, I'd be spending time in my like little damp office, not seeing a lot of sunlight. So I might as well take the opportunity here to like take a walk in the Vondel Park, which is like the biggest park in Amsterdam. So I took a detour and walked through the park and reflected a bit about the situation. I think if you're able to do something like that, then the profession is, and then it's doable to succeed in this profession. If you're going to be very negative in your approach to adversity, then it's going to be really tough. So that's like one example, cognitive restructuring or reframing. Another one is, I told this a couple of times and maybe even in a masterclass before, but last year I lost like 30K in December. So I was down 20K after the first 8-9 days. I was really fed up, frustrated, and like I was playing 200 and now like in September, something like that, August. So it moved up pretty quickly. So 20K is like, when it goes down, it's it's something you got to get used to. But I remember one of those nights taking the decision to just like I told myself, okay, I'm just going to sit there, and if I'm going to lose, I'm just going to try to see it as an opportunity. Like there's an opportunity in losing 30K in a month, and there are actually multiple opportunities in there. Like how we're going to deal with the emotions that we're facing, like how we're going to deal with the insecurity. Is there something we can learn on a technical level that we don't understand yet? So there are a lot of challenges that are actually brought to light, and you can do two things. One is you can like feel sorry for yourself and get annoyed and think stuff like, I'm never going to get there. This game is rigged, always fish, fish always win and stuff like that. Or you can try to reframe it and see it as an opportunity, which is hard, and it's not consistent. It's not like every morning or every evening I sit down smiling, losing another 3K. So it's a process where you kind of do it sometimes, and sometimes you fail and just are annoyed. And so I guess what I'm saying is the growth mindset thing is something you can get better in. Another thing you can do is take full control of your process. This video can help. The masterclass that you did yesterday with Tom can be very useful as well, I think, because if you take control of your process, that's like the first step in acknowledging that there's growth to be made and that things are not fixed. Active reflection is quite important. And one of the ways you can do that is keeping a journal. I used to have a schedule. That's why I was not annoyed, but like yesterday when Tom said, I'm going to do something with scheduling, I thought to myself, oh, Jesus, that's something I want to do. We didn't discuss it with each other. Luckily, I could like reframe it a little bit. But I had a schedule where at the end of the day, I had to pick like 3 things I could get better in, 3 things that I liked about the day. By doing it like that, you're like training your brain to see the positive thing and try to train your brain to see like the challenge in the adversity that you're facing. Something that I do till this day with my wife, by the way, before we go to sleep, we name 3 things that we like about the day. So it's something, if you just do it actively, and it might sound a little bit like hooey to just randomly say to yourself or whatever, write down things like 3 things that you like about the day, might feel like not really useful, but it's actually a way of training your brain to focus on the right things. All right, so I'm going to transition into my big friend, Anders Ericson here, who is the author of Peak, another book that I highly recommend. And he says the differences between expert performers and normal adults are not immutable. That is due to genetically prescribed talent. Instead, these differences reflect a lifelong period of deliberate effort to improve performance. And I think like he's an expert on the field of experts. So what I think doesn't really matter if he says this, it's probably true because he's done years of research on like academic level. Where he worked with a lot of experts in the field and tried to dissect why do they become an expert and how that some become an expert and some don't. I think oftentimes when we see, even in poker, when we see someone like Linus Love, you'll hear stuff like he's a beast, like he's just God, he's the best. Like there's this thing where it's almost like it's supernatural, like he didn't have any influence on, or like very little influence on on where he is right now. Whereas I think the reality of the situation is that Linus probably has some talent for becoming like a poker player. He has some natural skills, and in addition to that, he just spent hours in the lab and did some really dry work super consistently, because otherwise you just can't get to the point where he is right now. I want to give two examples of two studies that both Angela Duckworth, the author of Grit, and as Ericson, the author of Peak, have done. And these stories underline the importance of deliberate practice. So first story is about Steve Feloon. He was a Carnegie Mellon undergraduate, and he was the subject of a study that Anders Ericson did. The idea was that Steve would work with Anders Ericson to improve upon a specific skill. The skill that Anders chose was reciting numbers from short-term memory. Now, up until that point, a lot of research pointed into the direction that there was a clear limit of what you can learn or what you can put into the short-term memory and then take out of it in a short time span. So they would recite numbers, Anders would recite numbers, and Steve would have to recite them as well. Not sure what the word reciting means actually, but you get the point. And usually the amount of numbers, we're going to do it ourselves in a little bit, so you can practice it. But there is this area between 7 and 9 numbers that most humans, for most humans, is like the ceiling for most regular humans. And Steve did this as well. And for 8 to 10 months, he was stuck at this 7 to 9 number. Sometimes he would get to 10 or 11, but he would be stuck after like months and months of practicing. The thing that I did is Anders would recite numbers. If Steve like recited 6 numbers, for instance, then they would add 1 number, so they would do 7. If Steve got that one right, then they would get to 8. Should Steve fill the 8 numbers, then he would go back to 6, so they would subtract 2. And they used the form of deliberate practice to improve upon the skill. I'm going to recite 10 numbers, don't cheat, and I'm going to recite them one by one with roughly a second in between numbers, roughly the same exercise that Steve did. And we're going to try to aim for 10. So roughly like a little bit above what most humans are able to do. All right, let's go. 1, 7, 5, 8, 5, 0, 9, 1, 5, 6. Let's see if we got someone who got it correct. The answer is 1, 7, 5, 8, 5, 0, 9, 1, 5, 6. There's one that got it correct, so it seems, but he or she may have been cheating.
That was me.
Nice. Me.
Anyway, Steve continued doing this, and at one point, after 2 years of practicing, he got to recite this. This is the sequence that he recited. These are 82 numbers. So you can this is just an average human being, right? This is not, if I'd say this out loud right now, you'd think that's beyond what's humanly attainable, and still like a random guy that just has no photographic memory, none of that. He just practiced and got better at it by doing deliberate practice. Now, I looked up the world record for doing this type of exercise, and then you're looking at this, which is this is beyond what's reasonable, I think. 456 digits at 1 digit per second, and this was in 2015, was the latest I could find. Maybe in like the last 6 years, it wouldn't be surprising to me if somebody improved upon this. The idea here is that if you put effort into it and you do it in a structured way, then you can reach far beyond what the ceiling is for you, or what you think the ceiling is. Oftentimes when you think you've reached your ceiling, you have actually reached your ceiling at that point, but later on you can have many breakthroughs. This is Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book, Grit. I highly recommend to read that. It's one of the books that shaped the trajectory towards high stakes for me. It's the book that she wrote on, and the book is on how to become an expert. Basically, that's the gist of it. How do some people excel and how do some people not excel? And what's it that we can take away from the people that excel? She's a professor as well, and she's worked with Anders Ericson. Another example that I wanted to highlight is the research that Angela has done in spelling bee contests. So what she did is she set out questionnaires to championship contestants months before a contest. She asked them, what do you do to prepare for the spelling bee contest? Later, she then looked at the results of each of the individuals and tried to see what is it that makes this type of contestant excel, and what kind of study routine do they have, and what makes it so that the average contestant doesn't succeed. She basically dissected 3 types of activities. One is reading for pleasure, playing word games like Scrabble. So do it in a low intensity, sort of fun way. You actually like what you're doing quite a bit. Getting quizzed by another person or a computer program. And unassisted and solitary spelling practice, including memorizing words from the dictionary and reviewing words in a spelling notebook. And according to her definition of deliberate practice, only exercise 3 would be strictly considered as deliberate practice. 2 might be deliberate practice, but there are some more boxes that need to be checked. Anyway, these are the results that she found. Grittier spellers practiced more than less gritty spellers, and I think this is fairly intuitive. If you have that inner urge to excel at something, then it's more likely that you're going to, like in poker, for instance, study a lot of sims. And if you don't have that, then it's less likely that you'll do so. So no real surprises there. But there was a very small correlation between the time spent studying and a very large correlation, and the result, and a very large correlation between the type of practice that you did and the result that you had. And there was no link found between reading for fun and advancement for further rounds. So it had very little to no influence whatsoever. And she asked the spellers as well, how did you like what you were doing? And on average, spellers rated deliberate practice as significantly more effortful and far less enjoyable than other activities. It's almost like you're studying for a test and you got to dig really deep. It's just tiring. You don't really like doing it. And I think it's important to realize that, because when you're looking at a sim and you're like, this is just pretty tough stuff, and I actually don't really like doing it, then it might be worth trying to overcome that feeling of, I don't want to do it, I don't like this, because it might actually be way more high value for you to spend that hour or half an hour a day where you don't really like what you're doing, but it's effortful and deliberate, rather than talking about hand histories with friends and doing it like a low intensity type thing where you're kind of talking about random hand histories. It's kind of fun. The environment is sort of engaging, but it's not really gaining you a lot. Angela Duckworth defines deliberate practice as a structured process with the specific intent to improve upon a skill. There's a clearly defined stretch goal, immediate and informative feedback, high concentration level, they should say, and repetition with reflection and refinement. We're going to go through some examples. Jesus, I made a lot of mistakes in this slideshow. I always start about 4 hours before we do the call, last moment type thing, and I always am at least 10 minutes late. So I could just start 30 minutes earlier, but then I don't feel the urgency yet, so it's kind of an annoying thing. All right, so step one would be identify your biggest leak, break it up in the smallest possible sub-skill. I'm going to give some examples about this in a bit. Set a specific measurable goal for yourself in your study session. Study the specific area of your game with high intensity. I highlighted high intensity because I think that's something that usually is missing. Focusing on the mistakes you're making while getting expert feedback from your environment. And expert feedback can be from a coach, which is like in poker is pretty tough, because like even though you're in a CFP, like I can't have multiple one-on-ones with every student every week. It's just not something that is within like the realm of reality. So you gotta try to find expert feedback in more creative ways. One would be looking at a model, like whether it's data scientific model or a solver model, like that there is some feedback that you can get from an environment like that. And you could just like post 10 hands in the chat and you're like, let's say you're defending versus flop bets in a specific node of the game tree, and you're not sure if whether your interpretation of the sim is correct. You could just post those 10 hands or 5 hands with your interpretation and ask for feedback on that interpretation. And then refine your feedback in a way where at the end you have like a pretty condensed version of what everybody thinks. And then it's a matter of rinse and repeat. A common leak would be overfolding versus flop bets. And I want to start out with something that everybody says every day, including myself. My understanding of flop defense is solid. I want to tell you like a little story. I was studying a little bit like a couple of weeks ago. I was drilling in a GTO trainer, and a spot came up where I faced a 1/3 c-bet in a random spot, and it was a paired board. I had ace high, like ace 5 offsuit, something like that, like a really weak ace high, and I clicked fold. This was like a couple of months ago. It was not a year ago when I was playing 100 and now. Or 200 and now. This was not 2 years ago, but I was playing 20 and now. This was like not that long ago. I folded the hand and it was shown as a mistake. So I thought to myself, okay, weird. I went through the sims and different paired boards, and I kind of realized that on most paired boards on that node, you just have to call all your ace highs. It doesn't really matter if you have a backdoor or not. It's just something that happens on paired boards. The gist of the story is you can play high stakes and still suck at flop defense. And you can have like a decent fold versus flop bet and still suck at flop defense. You can have decent frequencies but still mess up consistently. And I think using the example of overfolding versus flop bets is so solid because it's, for one, universal, and two, it's a very low risk entry point, meaning the interpretation of a sim is pretty straightforward. You can't really make a lot of mistakes. If you have a sim or a subset of sims, if you have a GTO trainer, then pretty much that's all you need to go and go through a bunch of hands and then see if you can improve upon it. All right, so a new recruit joins the team. After his recruitment phase is over, he really joins like the main team. He does a stat check and realizes his fold versus flop bet is too high. So he identifies a leak. What advice do we have for him? I think I put an open-ended question here, but I'm not sure. No, I didn't. Okay, so I'm just going to let you speak up if you want to. Like any tips?
Check his flop, check raise first.
Right, makes sense. Just going to write those down. The answers that we get. You can just feel free to just.
I would suggest that you. Or he filters his database for hands in that specific node and takes like 20 and then compares like or at least finds the ones which he thinks might be marginal or where he folds, and then compare them with, like, if the baseline in this node is going to be defending at equilibrium, then compare with the solver outputs for those specific boards and formations.
Cool.
I'd check if he got the concepts right. Like he might just overcall against big sizings and overfolding in small. So, and then probably just trying to, like, if this is a spot where we should play like the solver or come close to it, then just study with aggregation reports, pick the highest boards, like the highest folds to the lowest board and the in-between ones, and then try to work myself through that.
Yeah, I would just tell him, my advice would just be to overcall against small bets, small C bets. Simple.
Yeah, but what's over and what's under? If I tell you to give me a big ice cream, a big chocolate ice cream, do you know what's big? Like that's subjective, right?
Well, relative to where he's been, he means.
And when you said big black, I just
I said big ice cream, man. Like,
chocolate ice cream. You said chocolate.
Yeah.
Big chocolate. Okay. I was remembering. Okay.
Something like that.
Well, if you're going to be a difficult student like that, then I'd just say call everything against a small sizing.
Yeah, sure. But then the next post is, guys, I'm overcalling the flop. What can I do to improve on that?
Then I'll block you on Discord. And we'll
Fuck this guy. This Tom 2 is never going to get anywhere. Cool. So like we have basically a bunch of things that we can advise him. If you structure the advice that we give him a little bit, then you'll get to like something that resembles a form of deliberate practice. I outlined it right here. So I'm not sure how I did this, right? Okay. Identify your biggest leak and dissect it. So he's overfolding versus flop bets. Now I want to make it very specific. You could, like, overfolding versus flop bets, if you study that as a whole concept, that's you might just filter versus flop bets, but then it's really hard to build contacts folding versus flop bets, because it's really hard to find a heuristic or a set of heuristics that works in all flop spots. Like in 4-bet pots, your strategy is going to be significantly different than big blind versus small blind versus 1/3. And like, for instance, what Adrian said about facing a large C-bet is going to be significantly different than facing a small C-bet. So the first step that you want to take, if you want to do it in a deliberate way, is say, I identified the leak, folding versus flop bets. The first thing you want to ask yourself, is this my biggest leak? Or am I just not aware that like a full house beats it straight? Like, if that's the case, then probably just go back to the fundamentals. Now, let's say your biggest leak is folding versus flop bets. Then the next step would be, okay, let's dissect this into the smallest possible component that I can find, and then build context around that specific component of folding versus flop bets. And then before each session, you want to set a specific measurable goal. I saw that last night you did something with SMART goals, and you could do something similar for your study. And then you want to study it with high intensity and acquire expert feedback. And I think this is something that often goes wrong, and you want to rinse and repeat it. If we have one player that says, I'm going to just filter hands where I face a flop bet, and I'm going to put hands in Pio, like where I'm not sure what to do. Let's say you have a player that says, I'm just filtering those hands, facing a flop bet, I'm just going over them, and every spot that I feel kind of weird about, I'm just going to study it. It's not to say that that's not effective. It's just not the most effective way to go about this. Because in one, you're going to face a 4-bet pot EP versus MP, a C-bet with like a middle pair on an ace-high texture. And then the other one, you're facing a small C-bet, big blind versus small blind in a single spot on a low board. And it's really hard to like build context, like in some sort of overarching type of context that makes it easy to create a network of heuristics in your mind. Whereas if you just pick one or the other, doesn't really matter which one, probably take the most prominent one, then it's pretty easy to build context around a specific spot. So let's say we're going we're going to go for big blind versus small blind facing 1/3. That would be one where you're specific. It's a small subsection of the game, and you can set goals to improve upon that. Next step would be I will create a set of 20 flashcards, or like I think it was Dan that said like find a number of hands in your database. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be flashcards. Just make sure that at the beginning of the session you have like the stretch goal. I want to find 20 spots that I'm comfortable by, and I want to run them in the solver and try to get the model to tell me what is the threshold. Another exercise that I often do is I will drill in a GTO trainer, and I will only stop when I get either 15 in a row or set a new personal record. So I have GTO Wizard on my phone, and for a while before I went to sleep, I would, and this is not something I recommend because it's not really a way to set your mind at ease before you go to bed, but I would drill a specific spot, and I would tell myself I can only go to sleep after I set a new personal record in that spot. So doing it like that brings some sort of intensity to the game, where you're not really randomly trying to find spots. Okay, I found one, whatever. But now you're at like number 14, you really want to go to bed, or you really want to move on to playing your session or whatever. And you face another spot, the 15th spot that you got to get right for your new personal record. And you're thinking, okay, what's happening here? Okay, this is a low board. What have we learned about low boards? Okay, we got to defend a bunch of ace highs. I don't have any backdoor. I don't have any additional equity. But I think on this particular texture, it's dry enough that I have to defend all my ace highs, so I'll just call. So you got to bring that intensity to the game as if it's like basically a life or death type of situation. And when I do the exercise, I will do it with the intensity of studying like I would for an important exam. If I make a mistake, I'll try to provide as much context as possible. So when I do the GTO drill thing, I'm not clicking through like specific spots and think, oh, mistake, oh, nice, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. And there's this video in which I do that. And what you'll often see in that video, blue tier, is you'll see me go over a spot and I'll say, I think this is a call, but I'm just curious to see what happens if the jack is a 9, or I just want to see what happens on different paired boards like this. Do we call it? So the intensity in these videos for myself is pretty high because I really want to figure it out. And I really want to make sure that I understand the spot as well as I can, so that should I get quizzed on a test to attend the Harvard of poker players, and in a way, like a session should be viewed as that, then I'll be well prepared. And I'll make sure that I like spend the time that I spend studying, that I do that with a very high intensity. And I'll make sure that I rinse and repeat. So when I was working still, this would like an average Saturday be like a Sunday I would just play in the evenings as well. And I would be somewhat consistent with this. There would be many days where I would just get hammered on Friday and then I'd skip like the first part, right? I would just start at 12 and then do the GTO trainer, somewhat half hangover. That's the nice thing about poker as a profession, is that everybody kind of sucks at consistency and the study process. That it seems like a super competitive field, but it's actually not that competitive. If you do a couple of things right, like table selecting, do this somewhat consistently, and work on your mental game, then it's pretty much guaranteed that you'll get to higher stakes. So you don't need to be as consistent as this seems like it is. The idea here is that you're making sure you make use of something that's called spaced repetition, where it's way more effective in terms of the knowledge that you're gaining out of every minute spent studying. Do it a couple of times for short bursts of time, like for a short period of time, rather than spending like 3 hours of studying. I could just spend 3 hours of studying and then grind the rest of the day, but that's less effective. All right, to summarize, because I feel like this is the last slide. Yeah, it is. When I moved up through the stakes, like over the last year in detox, like let's say from the beginning in detox to the last few weeks or whatever, transcended from 15L to 2K in a pretty swift fashion. One thing that I'll say about that is people don't realize how lucky I've been in like a lot of areas of moving up. Like most of my shots, for instance, were just one-time shots. I just win 20 binds and never really look back. And there was only one time, I think, where I had to recoup my shot, which is pretty rare. It's just super lucky if you go through that. There were a bunch of things that I was very lucky in. But after, like, I started moving up to 500, 1K, and 2K, I started coaching a bunch of lower stakes players, and they hit me up randomly for feedback. And you get into that position where you feel like you're, I don't know, you're better than the rest, and in some way you are, in some way you're just lucky. Anyway, a lot of the things that people will project to you is like, they'll say something like, that guy's a beast, and you read it, and that feeds your ego, and it's really nice. But the thing is, it's not that I'm more special or less special than any of you guys. I mean, I spent years playing 1 and 2 cents, playing a 19 VPIP, 12 PFR, probably a river bet of like 33 and a folded river bet of 70. So there's nothing special about me. I think I got lucky, and I think that's 1. And 2, I think I put myself in a place to get this lucky by making sure that I'm somewhat consistent in my study routine and try to understand what it is that makes some people excel and that's why if I have a one-on-one session, I'll often like put emphasis on this part of the poker lifestyle. I had a call with a guy not that long ago, and he said, I won't name him, but he said, if he watches this back, then should be fun. I really don't like studying. I really don't like going into a solver. Just hate it. Don't really want to do it. And if that's what it takes, then I'm just not going to do it. And I used to be of a position when I moved up, like I hated solver work. Now I like it. And I started to realize that it's something that you can learn. So in a lot of the coaching sessions that I do, I had one the other day where the guy said, I said, if you basically we had this conversation, he said, I'm not really structured. And I thought to myself, it's insane that people think that they say that out loud, I'm not a structured person. Because if you look at me, for instance, I dropped out of high school twice, dropped out of college twice. And I think it was last week that I got, like maybe like 2 weeks ago, that I started waking up at 4 a.m. consistently. And I've been waking up at 4 a.m. pretty much every single day since. But that's something that I learned throughout the last couple of months. It's not something that's been given to you or not. It's just something you can improve upon. Should you feel like, this sounds like a lot of work and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it, just know that I've failed hundreds of times doing it, and I still fail doing this on a daily basis. It's just something I have in the back of my mind and try to do it as actively as I can. And if you do that, then it's pretty hard not to succeed at getting better, and you're going to be doing way better than the average poker player who will be doing like a random hand review with a random coach. Most useless time spent, basically. So yeah, I guess that's the takeaway. Don't feel like you gotta, I hope you don't walk away from this thinking like this is going to be hard, because it's going to be hard, but it's going to be fine. You'll be able to do it, and you'll fail multiple times. But as long as you keep trying and try to see and try to learn from your mistakes, then you'll be fine. All right. So I told you guys it was going to be, in the Netherlands, we call it a hoorcollege. And it basically means you're sitting in like this gigantic room, and there's one guy speaking, and all of the students are on the side watching Netflix, looking at poker hands, talking WhatsApp, whatever. So I kind of hope I didn't lose your guys' attention.